The great hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with worried voices. Hundreds of alien beings filled the massive chamber on Nexus Prime. Their strange forms cast long shadows under the bright lights. Some looked like walking crystals. Others had too many arms or eyes that glowed in the dark. Ambassador Zephyr stood at the center podium. His crystal body caught the light and threw rainbow colors across the walls. The Velinari leader cleared his throat with a sound like breaking glass. "Fellow council members," Zephyr began, "we face a crisis unlike any in our recorded history. The humans are active again in the outer sectors." A wave of fear swept through the chamber. Even the bravest warriors among the alien races felt their hearts skip when they heard that word, humans. On the far edge of known space, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship. The USS Liberty cut through the darkness between stars. Jake was a tall man with kind eyes and graying hair. He had been exploring space for 20 years. To him, this was just another day at work. "Captain," called Dr. Lisa Park from her station. She was the ship's science officer. Her job was to study new life forms they found. "I'm picking up something strange on the long-range sensors." Jake walked over to look at her screen. "What kind of strange?" "It's a ship, sir. But it's not like anything in our databases. The design is completely unknown." Commander Ryan Brooks looked up from his weapons. Console. He was younger than Jake, but had sharp instincts for danger. "Could be a trap, Captain. We should call for backup." Jake studied the readings. The unknown ship was dead in space. No power readings, no life signs. It had been drifting for who knows how long. "No," Jake said quietly. "We go take a look." Back on Nexus Prime, Zephyr continued his report to the worried council. "The humans have found another derelict ship. This time it's in the Kepler sector, the forbidden zone we have avoided for over 1,000 years." High Counselor Vexenon of the Torgathi spoke up. His voice was deep and full of concern. "Surely they will follow proper protocol. They will mark the location and wait for a joint." Exploration team. Zephyr's crystal form darkened. "No, Counselor. They are already aboard the vessel." Gasps filled the chamber. Even the bravest alien warriors felt cold fear at those words. The Liberty moved closer to the mystery ship. It was huge, maybe twice the size of their own vessel. The metal was black and seemed to absorb light. Strange symbols covered its hull. "Take us alongside," Jake ordered. "Prepare a boarding party." "Sir," Ryan said carefully, "maybe we should think about this. Unknown alien tech can be dangerous. What if it has defenses? What if there are diseases?" Jake smiled the way he always did before doing something that worried his crew. "And we'll deal with it when it happens. Dr. Park, you're with me. Ryan, you have the bridge." Within an hour, Jake and Lisa were floating through the airlock of the alien ship. Their suits kept them safe from the cold vacuum of space. Emergency lights on their helmets cut through the darkness inside. The ship was like nothing they had ever seen. The walls curved in impossible ways. Symbols glowed faintly when they got close. The air was still and dead, but their instruments showed it was somehow still breathable. "Jake," Lisa whispered, forgetting protocol in her excitement. "Look at this." She was standing in front of a wall covered in what looked like a star map. But as they watched, the symbols began to change. The map was updating itself, showing new information. "It's responding to us," Jake said with wonder. "The ship is still active." Lisa pulled out her scanner and began taking readings. "The technology is incredible. It's like nothing we've ever seen. But somehow, I think I understand how it works." That was the thing about humans that scared the galaxy. They looked at the impossible and saw opportunity. They faced the unknown with curiosity instead of fear. Back on the Liberty, Ryan watched his captain and the doctor explore the alien ship. He knew he should order them back. Every protocol said this was too dangerous. But he also knew Jake was right to go. This could be the discovery of a lifetime. On Nexus Prime, the Council continued their emergency meeting. Representative after representative stood to voice their fears about human activity. "They adapt too quickly," said Counselor Nethara of the ancient Cepharians. "What takes our best scientists years to understand, they grasp in hours. They take risks that no sane being would consider," added General Keth Volume of the Sitheks. "Empire. They act without proper analysis or preparation. Worst of all," Zephyr concluded, "they succeed. Every time they do something that should kill them, they somehow make it work." Inside the alien ship, Jake and Lisa had found the bridge. Ancient consoles came to life at their touch. Screens filled with information in a language they had never seen before. "I'm getting readings from all over the ship," Lisa reported. "Jake, this vessel has been here for over 10,000 years. The civilization that built it is long gone. What happened to them?" Jake asked. Lisa was quiet for a long moment as she studied her instruments. "I think they were running from something. This ship was damaged in battle. They made it this far before the crew died." Jake looked around the bridge with new eyes. These beings had fought and died trying to escape some terrible enemy. Now their ship was a tomb, drifting between the stars. "Can we learn from their technology?" he asked. Lisa's eyes lit up with excitement. "Jake, this is beyond anything we've ever seen. If we can understand even a fraction of this, it could change everything. Our ships, our weapons, our understanding of space itself." And that was exactly what the Galactic Council feared most. Humans didn't just explore. They learned. They adapted. They took the knowledge of dead civilizations and made it their own. Within 6 hours, Lisa had downloaded terabytes of information from the alien ship's computers. Jake had mapped its entire structure. They worked with a speed and efficiency that would have amazed and terrified any alien observer dot as they prepared to return to the Liberty. Jake took one last look around the bridge. "Whatever destroyed these people, we need to be ready for it?" Lisa nodded. "With their knowledge, we will be." The Galactic Council meeting ended with a resolution to increase monitoring of human activities. But deep down, every member knew the truth. They weren't trying to protect the galaxy from humans. They were trying to protect themselves from a species that refused to accept limits. The humans were coming, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. 6 months had passed since the discovery in the Kepler sector. The galaxy was still talking about what the humans had found. More importantly, they were worried about what the humans were doing with that knowledge. Sergeant Alex Carter stood in the armory of the USS Defiance. He was checking his rifle for the 3rd time that morning. His squad of Marines was getting ready for what looked like another routine patrol. Alex was a big man with steady hands and calm eyes. He had been fighting battles across the galaxy for 8 years. "Sarge," called Private Danny Kim from across the room. "You think we'll see any action today?" Alex smiled. Danny was new to the unit, fresh from Earth. He still had that eager look that young Marines got before their first real fight. "In this business, Kim, you never know. Stay ready for anything." The alert klaxon suddenly filled the ship with its harsh sound. Red lights flashed as the crew rushed to battle stations. Alex's cum unit crackled to life. "All Marines to the briefing room. We have a situation." Lieutenant Kelly Davis was already at the front of the room when Alex and his squad arrived. She was a tough woman who had earned her rank through skill and courage. Behind her was a holographic display showing a star system none of them recognized. "Listen up, Marines," Kelly began. "We just received a distress call from New Haven Colony. It's a joint settlement with 3 different alien species. They're under attack by the hive more. Several Marines groaned. The hive more were bad news. They looked like giant insects and fought like demons. They attacked colonies on the edge of space, taking slaves and resources. What's the tactical situation? Alex asked. Kelly touched her control pad, and the display changed. It showed a planet, with several settlements marked in red. The hive more have landed in force. At least 3 hive ships. The colonists are trapped in their main settlement. Our alien allies are following standard protocol. Which means? Asked Corporal Jenny Brooks. She was Alex's second in command, and knew alien military doctrine well. They're pulling back to defensive positions and waiting for reinforcements. Standard tactical withdrawal protocol. They won't engage the enemy directly. Alex frowned. How long until reinforcements arrive? 2 weeks minimum. The colonists won't last 2 days, Alex said grimly. Kelly nodded. That's why we're going in. The Defiance will drop us on the surface in 4 hours. Our job is to buy time until help arrives. Dr. Matt Johnson spoke up from the back of the room. He was the unit's medic, a quiet man who kept them all alive. What about the other species? Are they supporting the operation? The Velinari will provide orbital support. The Torgothi will maintain a defensive perimeter. The Zephyrians are sending medical supplies. Alex understood what that meant. The aliens would help from a safe distance, but they wouldn't join the actual fighting. That was standard for them. They were smart, careful, and logical. They didn't take unnecessary risks. Humans were different. 4 hours later, Alex and his squad were dropping through the atmosphere of New Haven in their combat pods. The planet was beautiful from the air. Green forests stretched to the horizon, broken by rivers and small cities. But Alex wasn't looking at the scenery. He was studying the tactical display showing enemy positions. The hive more had surrounded the main colony with a circle of warrior drones. Their hive ships sat like dark mountains on the plains nearby. Remember the plan, Alex said over the comm. We hit them fast and hard. Keep moving, keep fighting. Don't let them pin us down. The pods crashed into the forest outside the colony. Alex was first out, his rifle already in his hands. The rest of his squad spread out around him. Kelly's voice came through the radio. All units, this is Bravo Leader. We have visual on the enemy. Begin the attack. What happened next would be talked about in alien military academies for decades to come. The humans did something that violated every principle of warfare the galaxy knew. They attacked, not a careful probe or a testing raid, not a strategic withdrawal to better positions. They launched a full assault against an enemy that outnumbered them 10-1. Alex led his squad straight at the nearest group of Hivemore warriors. The insect creatures were 8 feet tall, with armor like shells and razor-sharp claws. They had been conquering colonies for centuries. No one fought them directly. The humans opened fire at 200 meters. Their bullets tore through Hivemore armor like paper. The aliens had never faced weapons designed using ancient technology from the Kepler derelict, but the Hivemore had numbers. For every one that fell, 2 more took its place. They swarmed toward the human positions within human speed. There, flanking us on the left, Danny Kim shouted. Let them come, Alex replied calmly. He switched his rifle to full auto and kept firing. The Hivemore reached the human lines. This should have been where the defenders broke and ran. Every other species in the galaxy would have pulled back at this point. It was the logical thing to do. Instead, Alex drew his combat knife and met the first warrior head-on. The creature was twice his size and had natural weapons that could cut through steel. But Alex had something the Hivemore had never encountered before. He refused to give up. The fighting was brutal and close. Jenny Brooks took a claw across her shoulder, that would have killed most aliens. She bandaged the wound and kept fighting. Danny Kim's rifle jammed, so he picked up a fallen Hive-More weapon and used it against them. Dr. Johnson moved through the battle like a ghost, treating wounded Marines without stopping his own firing. When Alex took a hit to his leg, Matt slapped a combat patch on it and pushed him back into the fight. "You're not dying on my watch, Sarge," Matt said with a grin. The Hive-More began to hesitate. In all their centuries of conquest, they had never faced an enemy that just wouldn't stop. The humans kept coming, kept fighting, kept adapting to everything the insect warriors threw at them. Kelly Davis saw the change in enemy behavior and pressed the advantage. "All units advance. They're breaking." The Marines moved forward as one. They had been on the planet for less than an hour, but they had already changed the entire dynamic of the battle. Aboard the Alanari support ship, Commander Zephano watched the battle in amazement and horror. His species had evolved beyond physical violence millions of years ago. They fought with technology and careful planning. "This is madness," he whispered to his tactical officer. "They're fighting at close range against superior numbers. They should be dead. But they're winning," his officer replied. It was true. The human assault had thrown the Hive-More into confusion. The insect warriors were falling back toward their ships, something that had never happened before. On the planet's surface, Alex's squad had reached the colony's outer wall. The human and alien colonists watched from behind their barriers as the Marines fought to break the siege. "Open the gates," Alex called out. "We're getting you out of here." A Torgothi official appeared on the wall. His reptilian features showed confusion and fear. "But the evacuation ships won't arrive for days." "Where will we go?" "We'll figure that out when we get there," Alex replied. "Right now, we move." That was another thing that scared the galaxy about humans. They acted without having all the answers. They moved first and solved problems as they came up. The evacuation began immediately. Hundreds of colonists streamed out of the settlement under Marine protection. The Hive-More tried to regroup and cut them off, but every time they formed up, human squads would appear and scatter them with precise fire. Kelly Davis coordinated the fighting from a hill overlooking the colony. She could see the big picture developing. The Hive-More were confused and demoralized. Their simple plan of surrounding and overwhelming the colonists had been shattered by an enemy that refused to play by the rules. "Bravo leader to all units," she broadcast. "Phase 2 is go. We're taking the fight to their ships." The alien forces watching from orbit couldn't believe what they were hearing. The humans weren't content to evacuate the colonists. They were going to attack the Hive-More ships directly. It was suicide. Everyone knew that. But Alex and his Marines loaded into captured Hive-More vehicles and drove straight at the enemy landing sites. They had studied the insect ships during the evacuation. Dr. Johnson had even dissected a few dead warriors to understand their biology. The attack on the first Hive ship was swift and brutal. The Hive-More had never had their own ships attacked by ground forces. Their defenses were designed to protect against orbital strikes, not Marines with demolition charges. Alex planted his explosives on the ship's main power core while Jenny and Danny held off the defenders. The blast that followed could be seen from orbit. "One down," Alex reported calmly, moving to target 2. By the end of the day, all 3 Hive ships were destroyed. The surviving Hive-More had fled into the forest, broken and demoralized. The colonists were safe, and the Marines had taken minimal casualties. But the real victory was in the message it sent across the galaxy. The humans had done the impossible again. They had taken a hopeless situation and turned it into a complete victory through sheer determination and refusal to accept defeat. In the days that followed, military analysts from dozens of species would study the Battle of New Haven. They would Try to understand how such a small force had achieved such a decisive victory. The answer was simple, but it terrified them. The humans had won because they didn't know they were supposed to lose. They had looked at overwere. Dr. Amanda Foster stared at the holographic display floating above her desk. The image showed a Sithix Empire battlecruiser, sleek and deadly. For over 1,000 years, no one had found a way to defeat ships like this one. The Sithix had perfect technology, perfect tactics, and perfect discipline. Amanda rubbed her tired eyes. She had been working for 18 hours straight in her lab aboard New Geneva Station. Her team was trying to solve an impossible problem. How do you fight an enemy that has never lost a battle? Dr. Foster? Came a voice from behind her. Amanda turned to see Chief Engineer Pete Wilson standing in her doorway. Pete was a practical man who could fix anything with engines or circuits. His clothes were always stained with grease, and he always had a tool in his hand. What is it, Pete? I've been thinking about our Sithix problem, he said, walking into the lab. Maybe we're looking at this the wrong way. Amanda gestured too. A chair. What do you mean? Pete sat down and pulled out a small device. It looked like a child's toy compared to the advanced Sithix technology on the display. This is a simple magnetic pulse generator, Pete explained. I built it from spare parts in about an hour. It's crude, inefficient, and any first-year engineering student could make a better one. Okay, Amanda said slowly. And? Pete smiled. And it would completely disable a Sithix ship. Amanda stared at him. That's impossible. Their shields can stop anything we have. Their armor is the strongest in the galaxy. That's just it, Pete said, getting excited. Their defenses are designed to stop sophisticated attacks. Plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, gravity bombs. They've never had to deal with something this simple. Dr. Lara Kim appeared in the doorway. She was the team's computer specialist, a quiet woman who understood artificial intelligence better than anyone in human space. Pete's right, Lara said. I've been analyzing Sithix battle records for months. They always respond to threats in predictable ways. Their AI systems are perfect, but they're also rigid. They can't adapt to something completely new. Amanda looked back and forth between her two colleagues. You're talking about using primitive weapons against the most advanced military in the galaxy. Exactly. Pete and Lara said at the same time. That was how the Human Research Initiative began its most important project. While other species tried to match Sithix technology piece by piece, the humans decided to go in the opposite direction. Over the next 3 months, Amanda's team developed weapons that shouldn't work, but did. They built missiles that flew in random patterns instead of straight lines. They created energy weapons that fired in bursts instead of steady beams. They designed armor that was deliberately imperfect, with weak spots that would fool enemy targeting systems. Everything they made violated the principles of advanced warfare. Their weapons were inefficient, unpredictable, and sometimes dangerous to the people using them. But they had one advantage that made up for everything else, Dot. The Sithix had never seen anything like them. Commander Nick Taylor was the first person to test these new weapons in actual combat. He commanded a small patrol fleet near the border between human and Sithix space. Nick was a careful officer who had studied every battle the Sithix had ever fought. This is insane, he muttered as he read the orders from Amanda's team. They want us to attack a Sithix patrol with weapons that might not even work. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Sarah White, looked over his shoulder at the mission briefing. The simulations show good results, sir. Simulations, Nick repeated. We're betting our lives on computer models of weapons that exist nowhere else in the galaxy. But that was what humans did. They took impossible risks based on theories and hope. The test came 2 weeks later when Sithix War Prime Keth Volume led a patrol into human space. His battle group consisted of 3 ships, each one capable of destroying an entire human fleet using conventional tactics. Keth Volume was confident as his ships approached the border. The humans had tried to fight the Scythics before and always failed. Their weapons were too weak, their tactics too simple, their technology too primitive. "Human ships detected," reported his tactical officer. 3 vessels, standard configuration. "Scan them," Keth Volume ordered. "Let me see what pathetic weapons they're carrying this time." The scan results appeared on his display. For a moment, Keth Volume stared in confusion. "These readings make no sense," he said. "Their weapons appear to be deliberately flawed. Their targeting systems are unstable. Their armor has gaps in it." "Perhaps it's some kind of deception, War Prime," suggested his officer. "No," Keth Volume said slowly. "The humans are too honest for that kind of subterfuge. They must be testing new weapons." He was right, but he had no idea what that really meant. The battle began when Nick Taylor ordered his ships to attack. The human vessels charged straight at the Scythics' formation, firing weapons that behaved like nothing the enemy had ever seen. Pete Wilson's magnetic pulse missiles flew in spirals and loops instead of direct paths. The Scythics' point defense systems, designed for perfectly predictable trajectories, couldn't lock onto them. Half the missiles got through and exploded against the enemy hulls. The Scythic shields held, but something was wrong. The simple magnetic pulses were interfering with their control systems in ways their designers had never anticipated. "Shields are fluctuating," reported Keth Vol's tactical officer. "The interference is affecting our power grid." "Impossible." Keth Volume snapped. "Our systems are hardened against all known forms of attack." But Amanda Foster's team hadn't used any known forms of attack. They had invented completely new ones. Laura Kim's targeting viruses were the next surprise. Instead of trying to break through Scythic's computer defenses, they pretended to be harmless data packets. The enemy AI systems, trained to recognize sophisticated cyber weapons, let them pass right through. Once inside the Scythics' networks, the viruses did something that no advanced AI would ever expect. They made the enemy systems less efficient on purpose. Weapon charges took a few seconds longer. Shield harmonics shifted slightly out of tune. Navigation became just a little bit inaccurate. "What's happening to our systems?" Keth Volume demanded. "Unknown, War Prime. All functions are operating within normal parameters, but efficiency is down across all departments." The human ships pressed their attack. Nick Taylor watched his weapons tear into enemy shields that should have been impenetrable. It was working. The impossible weapons were actually working. "All ships, concentrate fire on the lead vessel," Nick ordered. "Let's see what happens when we hit them with everything we've got." What happened was something that had never occurred in 1,000 years of Scythic's military history. Their perfect battle cruiser began to break apart under weapons fire from a smaller, weaker enemy. Keth Volume couldn't believe what he was seeing. His ship's superior technology was failing against crude human weapons. His advanced tactics were useless against enemies who fought without any pattern or logic. "War Prime," his communications officer called out. "The other ships are requesting permission to withdraw." For the first time in his career, Keth Volume considered retreat. But retreat was not in the Scythics' military doctrine. They had never needed to plan for it. "We fight," he said grimly. "Increase power to weapons. Prepare for close combat." But the humans weren't done surprising him. As the Scythic ships moved closer, Amanda Foster's final innovation came into play. The human vessels suddenly split apart like puzzle pieces, revealing that each ship was actually 3 smaller craft connected together. The Scythics' targeting systems, locked onto single large targets, lost track completely. The smaller human ships swarmed around the enemy formation like angry insects. "This is impossible," Keth Volume whispered. Ships don't work that way. But human ships did, because humans had designed them to do things that shouldn't be possible. Battle ended with all 3 Sithix vessels crippled or destroyed. Nick Taylor's fleet had suffered damage, but nothing that couldn't be repaired. More importantly, they had proven that the greatest military power in the galaxy could be beaten. Word of the victory spread quickly through human space and beyond. But the real impact was felt in the Sithix Empire itself. For the first time in their history, they had lost a battle to an inferior enemy. Emperor Vexthul called an emergency meeting of his war council. The greatest military minds in the Empire gathered to analyze what had gone wrong. The humans used weapons that violate every principle of efficient design, reported the chief weapons analyst. Their tactics made no strategic sense. Their ship configurations are inherently unstable. And yet they won, the Emperor said quietly. Yes, Excellency. They won because we had no defense against weapons that shouldn't work and tactics that made no logical sense. That was the moment the Sithix Empire realized what the rest of the galaxy was beginning to understand. The humans weren't dangerous because they were better at warfare. They were dangerous because they changed the rules of warfare itself. Back on New Geneva Station, Amanda Foster was already working on new projects. Her team had dozens of ideas for weapons and tactics that would seem impossible to any logical mind. What's next? Pete Wilson asked as he studied their latest designs. Amanda smiled. Something even more impossible than what we just did. Lavra. Kim looked up from her computer. The Sithix will adapt eventually. They'll learn to counter our weapons. Then we'll make new ones. Admiral Grace Thompson stood on the bridge of her flagship, the USS Yorktown, watching the Crimson Nebula fill the view screen. The massive cloud of gas and dust stretched across space like a red ocean. Inside its swirling depths, electromagnetic. Storms raged with the power of 1,000 hurricanes. It was the perfect place for an ambush. Admiral, called her communications officer, we're receiving a transmission from the Coalition fleet. Grace nodded. She had been expecting this. Put it through. The face of High Commander Vexinen appeared on the main screen. The Targathi. Warrior looked confident as he spoke from his command ship hidden deep in the nebula. Admiral Thompson, Vexinen said with a slight smile, you have entered restricted space. Turn your ships around and leave immediately, or face the consequences. Grace studied the alien commander. Vexinen was a veteran of hundreds of battles. His reptilian features showed no fear, only certainty that his trap would work. Hi, Commander. Grace replied calmly, you're the one in restricted space. This is human territory, according to the Galactic Treaty of 2387. Treaties mean nothing when signed with a species that threatens the stability of the galaxy, Vexinen said. The Coalition has voted. Humanity must be contained before your madness spreads to other worlds. Grace felt a cold anger in her chest. The Coalition was made up of 12 different alien species, all united by their fear of human expansion. They had superior numbers, better defensive positions, and the home field advantage of fighting inside the nebula. Then I guess we'll have to disagree, Grace said simply. The transmission ended. Grace turned to her tactical officer, Commander Troy Martinez. Troy was a young man with sharp eyes and a mind that worked faster than most computers. What do you think, Troy? Grace asked. Troy studied the sensor readings from the nebula. The electromagnetic interference made it almost impossible to get clear readings, but he could see hints of the enemy fleet hiding in the storms. They've got us outnumbered 3-1, he said. They're using the nebula's interference to mask their exact positions. Standard tactics say we should wait for reinforcements. And non-standard tactics? Troy grinned. It was the same expression. His grandfather might have warned before charging up a hill under enemy fire. We go in there and show them what human crazy looks like. Grace nodded. She touched her comm unit to address the entire fleet. All ships. This is Admiral Thompson. We are about to enter the Crimson Nebula to engage a superior enemy force. Our sensors will be mostly blind. Our communications will be disrupted. Our weapons will have reduced effectiveness. She paused, letting that sink in. But we have one advantage they don't understand. We know how to fight in chaos. We know how to turn confusion into opportunity. We know how to make the impossible possible. Lieutenant Commander Beth Clark was listening to the Admiral's speech from the cockpit of her fighter. Beth led the fleet's fighter squadrons, small ships that could dart between the larger vessels like deadly insects. Blue Squadron, this is Blue Leader, Beth called over her comm. You heard the Admiral. We're going into the storm. Stay close to your wingman and trust your instincts. Blue Leader, came the voice of her wingman, Lieutenant Mike Davis. Our instruments are already going crazy just sitting here. How are we supposed to navigate in there? The same way humans have always navigated, Beth replied. We use our brains, our courage, and our refusal to give up. The human fleet moved into the nebula like a spear thrust into a furnace. Instantly, their sensors were overwhelmed by electromagnetic interference. Communication became spotty. Navigation. Systems struggled to maintain course headings. For most species, this would have been a disaster. Alien military doctrine required constant communication, precise coordination, and detailed battle plans. Fighting blind was considered suicide, but humans had learned to fight in mud and rain and darkness long before they reached the stars. They knew how to make decisions without perfect information. They knew how to adapt when everything went wrong. Contact, shouted Troy Martinez from his tactical station. Enemy ships bearing 27 Mark IV. Range, uncertain due to interference. All ships engage at will, Grace ordered. Don't wait for targeting solutions. Fire when you see something that looks like an enemy. The first human salvo lit up the nebula like fireworks. Plasma bolts and missile trails streaked through the gas clouds, some finding targets, others disappearing into the swirling mists. The Coalition fleet responded with their own barrage, but their weapons were as hampered by the interference as the human sensors. Both sides were essentially firing blind. This is madness, muttered Commander Vexnan from his flagship. They're fighting without proper coordination. They'll destroy each other. But that wasn't what happened. The human ships began to adapt to the chaos with frightening speed. Captains made decisions based on instinct and experience. Crews learned to read the interference patterns and predict where enemies might be hiding. Beth Clark led her fighters through the storm like a dancer, moving through smoke. Her instruments were useless, so she relied on her eyes and her gut feelings. When she saw the faint glow of an enemy engine through the gas, she attacked without hesitation. Blue Leader to Blue Squadron, she called out. I'm seeing movement. At grid reference 7 Alpha, form up on me. Blue Leader, came Mike's voice. I can't see anything on my scope. Then look out your window, Beth replied. Use your eyes. Trust what you see. The human fighters swarmed toward the enemy position. The Coalition pilots, trained to fight with perfect sensor information, were lost in the chaos. They couldn't understand how the humans were finding them in the storm. But humans had always been hunters. They knew how to track prey by sound, by smell, by the smallest visual clues. In the Crimson Nebula, those ancient instincts served them well. Enemy fighter squadron destroyed, Beth reported. Moving to next target, Grace smiled as she listened to the battle reports. Her ships were taking damage, but they were giving better than they got. The Coalition fleet, despite their superior numbers, was being torn apart by an enemy that refused to be blinded by the storm. Admiral, Troy called out, I'm reading massive energy signatures deeper in the nebula. Looks like their main battle line. Grace nodded. The coalition had kept their biggest ships in the center of the storm, where the interference was strongest. They thought it would protect them from human weapons. Take us in, Grace ordered. All ships, follow the Yorktown. We're going to the heart of this storm. Captain Roy Jenkins commanded the heavy cruiser USS Monitor. He watched his instruments flicker and fail as they pushed deeper into the nebula. His ship was flying blind, surrounded by enough electromagnetic energy to fry most electronic systems. Captain, called his navigation officer, we've lost our position reference. I have no idea where we are. Then we keep going straight until we hit something, Roy replied. If it shoots back, we know it's an enemy. That was human logic at its purest. When faced with uncertainty, they simply pushed forward and dealt with problems. As they came up, the coalition fleet was waiting in the heart of the nebula. Dozens of ships hung motionless in the storm, their crews confident that no enemy could find them in the chaos. They had been there for hours, preparing the perfect ambush. High Commander Vexenon watched his sensors show nothing but static and interference. The humans will never penetrate this deep, he told his tactical officer. They'll get lost in the outer storms and retreat. But humans didn't retreat. They adapted. When the first human ships emerged from the gas clouds, the coalition crews couldn't believe their eyes. The enemy had navigated through the worst electromagnetic storm in known space using nothing but determination and instinct. Impossible, Vexenon whispered. No species can navigate without instruments. Sir, his tactical officer called out, they're firing. The USS Yorktown opened up with everything she had. Her weapons lit up the nebula like a small star. Other human ships followed suit, filling the space around them with deadly energy. The coalition fleet tried to respond, but they were caught off guard. They had planned for a careful, coordinated battle using superior technology and numbers. Instead, they found themselves in a chaotic brawl where technology meant nothing and numbers were hard to count. Grace watched the battle unfold on her tactical display. The interference made it look like abstract art, with blips of light appearing and disappearing in seemingly random patterns. But she could see the truth underneath the chaos. We're winning, she said quietly. Troy looked at his instruments in confusion. Ma'am, I can't get clear readings on anything. How can you tell? Grace smiled. Listen to the conchatter. Watch how our ships are moving. Feel the rhythm of the battle. The enemy is panicking. They don't know how to fight when their perfect plans fall apart. She was right. Throughout the coalition fleet, crews were struggling to adapt to the unexpected situation. Their training had prepared them for orderly battles with clear objectives and precise timing. This chaotic melee was beyond their experience. But for humans, chaos was just another word for opportunity. Beth Clark's fighters were everywhere at once, striking targets and disappearing back into the gas clouds before the enemy could respond. Her pilots flew by instinct, using the nebula's interference as camouflage instead of treating it as an obstacle. Blue Leader, came Mike's voice. Philosopher Prime Nethara stood in the crystal gardens of Zephyr Prime, watching the three suns set over her ancient world. She was old, even by the standards of her long-lived species. For over 2,000 years, she had studied the rise and fall of civilizations across the galaxy, but she had never seen anything like humanity. Honored Prime, came a voice behind her. Nethara turned to see Dr. Ben Clark approaching through the crystal trees. He was the human cultural liaison assigned to the Zephyrian collective. Ben was a thoughtful man who asked more questions than he answered, which made him perfect for his job. Dr. Clark, Nethara said in her melodic voice, I have been expecting you. Ben smiled. You wanted to discuss the recent events in the Crimson Nebula? Among other things, the ancient being replied. Walk with me, young human. I have much to show you. They moved through the gardens together, past crystal formations that sang in the evening breeze. The Zephyrans had built this place to represent the harmony of all life in the galaxy. Each crystal represented a different species, all connected in a web of peaceful coexistence. Tell me, Nethara said as they walked, do you understand why the galaxy fears your people? Ben considered the question carefully. I think it's because we're unpredictable. We don't follow the same patterns as other species. That is part of it, Nethara agreed. But not the whole truth. They stopped before a new addition to the garden. A crystal formation that seemed to change color and shape, even as they watched it. It was beautiful but unsettling, like looking at controlled chaos. This represents humanity, Nethara explained. It was added to the garden 50 years ago, when your species first joined the galactic community. Ben stared at the shifting crystal. It's different from the others. Yes, all the other species have found their place in the cosmic order. They have achieved stability, wisdom, and peace. They know their limitations and accept them. And we haven't? Your people refuse to accept any limitations at all. Across the galaxy, Colonel San Rodriguez was proving that point. He led a special forces team on a mission that should have been impossible. 3 alien diplomats had been kidnapped by terrorists and taken to a fortress that had never been successfully attacked. Colonel called Sergeant Tony Brown, his demolitions expert. The fortress has energy shields that can stop anything we have. The walls are made of materials that can't be cut or blown up, and it's sitting on top of a mountain that can't be climbed. Sam studied the target through his binoculars. The terrorist stronghold looked like something out of a nightmare. Black walls rose from a peak surrounded by bottomless chasms. Energy fields crackled around the structure like trapped lightning. So what you're telling me, Sam said calmly, is that it's well defended. Sir, it's not just well defended. It's impossible to attack. Sam lowered his binoculars and looked at his team. They were the best soldiers humanity had to offer, but even they seemed daunted by the mission. Listen up, Sam said. I've heard the word impossible a lot in my career, usually right before we proved it wrong. That was the human way. When faced with the impossible, they simply redefined what was possible. The attack began at dawn. Instead of trying to break through the shields or scale the walls, Sam's team did something that violated every principle of military engineering. They went under the mountain dot, using mining equipment borrowed from a human colony. They carved tunnels through solid rock. It took 3 days of non-stop work, but they created a passage that led directly under the fortress. This is insane, muttered the terrorist leader when his sensors detected movement beneath his stronghold. No one attacks from underground. But humans did, because they approached problems from angles that others never considered. The rescue was swift and brutal. Sam's team emerged from the tunnels inside the fortress, bypassing all the external defenses. The terrorists found themselves fighting enemies who had appeared from nowhere, using tactics that made no logical sense. Within an hour, the diplomats were free, and the fortress was in human hands. The galaxy's most secure prison had been cracked, open like an egg by soldiers who refused to accept that it couldn't be done. Back on Zephyr Prime, Nethara and Ben had reached the center of the Crystal Gardens. Here stood the oldest formation, a massive structure that represented the first civilization to achieve galactic peace. The Eternal Builders, Nethara said quietly. They learned to live in harmony with the universe over 1 million years ago. Their society was perfect, their technology flawless, their wisdom complete. What happened to them? Ben asked. They achieved everything they wanted to achieve. They solved every problem they faced. They answered every question they could ask. Ben frowned. That sounds like a good thing. It was, until they realized they had nothing left to strive for. They slowly faded away, not through war or disaster, but through simple lack of purpose. Nithara led him to another crystal formation, this one showing signs of age and wear. A harmonic collective. They created a society where every member knew their exact place and function. No conflict, no uncertainty, no change. Let me guess, Ben said. They stagnated and died out, precisely. And the pattern repeated itself across the galaxy. Every species that achieved perfect order, perfect peace, perfect knowledge eventually stopped growing. They found their limits and accepted them. Until humans came along. Until humans came along, Nithara agreed. Meanwhile, Captain Susan Turner was engaged in delicate negotiations aboard the diplomatic station, Unity 1. Representatives from dozens of alien species had gathered to discuss a new treaty that would limit human expansion in the galaxy. The human presence has become too destabilizing, declared Ambassador Kextai of the consortium. Your people ignore established boundaries, violate accepted protocols, and cause chaos wherever they go. Susan listened patiently to each complaint. The aliens were afraid, and she understood why. But fear wasn't a foundation for lasting peace. Honored delegates, Susan said when it was her turn to speak, I think there's been a misunderstanding about what humanity wants. You want to spread your chaos across the galaxy, accused General Mordak of the Imperial Guard. No, Susan replied calmly. We want to grow. We want to learn. We want to explore and discover and become more than we were yesterday. And in doing so, you threaten the stability we have worked to build for thousands of years. Susan stood and activated a holographic display. It showed the current galactic map, with different species marked in different colors. Look at this map, she said. Really look at it. When was the last time any of your territories expanded? When did you last discover a new technology that changed how you live? When did you last face a challenge that made you grow stronger? The alien delegates looked uncomfortable. Susan was asking questions they didn't want to answer. We have achieved peace, Ambassador Kextai said defensively. You've achieved stagnation, Susan replied. And deep down, you know it. That's why you fear us. Not because we're dangerous, but because we remind you of what you used to be. Dr. Emma Grant, the mission's cultural specialist, stepped forward to support her captain. Every species in this room once explored the unknown, Emma said. You built ships and sailed into the darkness between stars. You faced terrible dangers and impossible odds. You grew and changed and became more than your ancestors ever dreamed. But somewhere along the way, you stopped. You decided you had enough. You chose safety over growth, certainty over discovery. The chamber fell silent. The truth was uncomfortable, but it was still the truth. On Zephyr Prime, Nithara had led Ben to the newest section of the Crystal Gardens. Here, dozens of formations were still growing, their crystalline structures reaching toward the sky like frozen dreams. These represent the species that still change, Nithara explained. Most are young races, still learning about the galaxy. But some are older civilizations that refuse to stop growing. Like humanity, Ben said. Like humanity. Your people terrify the galaxy because you represent infinite potential. Every time we think we understand your limits, you surpass them. Every time we predict your behavior, you surprise us. Ben looked around at the growing crystals. Is that really so frightening? Nithara was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was heavy with ancient wisdom. Dr. Clark, imagine you are comfortable in your home. Everything is exactly where you want it. You know every room, every piece of furniture, every shadow. Then someone comes and rearranges everything while you sleep. I'd be confused and upset. Ben admitted. Now imagine they do it again the next night. And the night after that. Every day, your world changes in ways you cannot predict or control. Ben began to understand. You'd start to fear the change itself. Exactly. Humanity doesn't just change your own civilization. Your very existence forces everyone else to change as well. You make the impossible possible, which means nothing is certain anymore. The truth was becoming clear. The galaxy didn't fear human aggression or human technology. They feared human potential. Back on Unity Station, the negotiations had reached a critical point. The alien delegates wanted to establish boundaries that would contain human expansion. Susan Turner had a different proposal. Instead of limiting ourselves, she said, why don't we work together to break your limits? What do you mean? Asked Ambassador Kextai. Join us, Susan.